Hello everybody, welcome to Vemma's first webinar, and today we'll be talking about how to transform your company culture with different innovation practices. I'm Erkka Isomäki. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Vemma, and my passion is actually to help organizations around the world to change the way that they innovate using different agile innovation practices and actually really take ownership over the way that they innovate.
Cool. Thanks, Erkka. I'm Jesse. I'm also one of the co-founders here at Vemma, and I'm responsible for our growth and innovation efforts. You may have also come across some of my writings related to innovation, leadership, and culture, perhaps on our own blog or some of the premier outlets in the industry. For example, Innovation Excellence, who we're really excited to be partnering with today. Could you, Erkka, tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So we were actually for actually a long time, we've been working on trying to deliver quality content in the field of innovation and leadership, which Jesse has been leading. And now when we got the opportunity to partner with Innovation Excellence, we really saw the vast amount of potential in getting to know the network of like-minded individuals in innovation and delivering these type of webinars, for instance. So we're really excited of what's going to happen today and then what we can do in the future.
Cool.
When me and Jesse started thinking about what would be a good topic for our first ever webinar, we had several different ideas, such as, for instance, how to evaluate ideas and how to keep up motivation in different innovation activities. But quite soon we actually realized that the most common questions that companies give us when they approach us is actually how do I motivate people to join the innovation activity? How do I make sure that when we do get a lot of ideas that people would actually take ownership and responsibility over them and actually do something about them, and how to make sure that this whole innovation thing is not just a spur of the moment type of stuff, type of phenomenon, but something that lasts for a long time. And we realized that the sort of innovative company culture would be a good topic, and how to transform that.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah.
To quickly go over our agenda, first we'll say a few words about Vemma, what we are as a company. Then we'll go over the three elements of corporate innovation as we see it. Then Jesse will talk about corporate culture in general, different elements of that, and how that can be altered in general. Then we'll talk about transforming the innovativeness of the company culture, which is basically the beef of today's presentation. And in the end, we'll hopefully have around 10 minutes for Q&A. So please, at any point, if you have any questions for us that you'd like us to answer, hopefully related to innovation culture, then please write those down in the chat. We'll pick them up and then answer as many as we can today here live. And the ones that we don't have time for today, we'll make sure to come back to those later on via email. We have all of your email addresses, of course, who registered to the webinar. Great. Yeah. Let's begin. So Vemma, we are a relatively fresh five-year-old technology company from Finland. We have operations or customers around the world, but our offices are focused here centrally in Espoo, which is quite close to the capital city of Finland. We work with a variety of different industries, since our core business is to develop a tool or software for innovation. And as we all know, that's not tied to any specific industry. So we're really excited to be able to work with various different types of companies. And then our figures have been quite good for last year. So we doubled our amount of customers, almost the same for revenue, and then happily grew our team as well. Now, when we think about the whole topic of innovation, we tend to divide that into three categories. So we have the tools, the processes, and then the culture around that. And oftentimes the tools are actually the most, how would you put it, like the concrete, most evident sort of phase for the whole innovation process, so or the innovation activity. So those are the software that you might be using for innovation management, different types of workshops that you're arranging, different types of like activities, concrete activities around innovation.
Yeah, the stuff that shows.
Yeah, the stuff that shows, exactly. And around that is basically the innovation process or processes. So the set of activities that defines when, who, how are going to be using the tools to run the innovation activity. What are the responsibilities, and how has the whole how has the structure been laid out for the innovation program? And then around that, we have the culture, and especially in the innovation context, the culture is actually really important. There are a lot of different business processes in which the culture doesn't affect that much, as you can just define how people are going to be interacting with each other. But since with innovation, a lot of it boils down to people taking responsibility, going in the uncomfort zone, being creative, changing the way that they think, how they behave. And if the culture is not at a stage today to allow that type of thinking and that type of transformation, then it's highly likely that the process won't function as well as it could, and also that the tools are not used as well as they could.
Yeah.
And that's basically what today is all about. So talking about how the culture is constructed and how it can be altered.
Yeah.
And this again comes back to how our customers and the companies that approach us, they oftentimes see the current phase or current state of their culture as being a challenge, something that prevents them from actually getting as much as they could. And it's not uncommon for myself, for instance, to hear that we are not going to be doing anything about this as long as our culture is in the state that it currently is. So we're not going to be implementing an innovation process. We're not going to be implementing any tools because people are not going to respond to them. And this is sort of a chicken and egg problem, and this is actually the whole core of the topic when me and Jesse thought about what we could say today. So does the innovative culture come first, or is that actually changed through the practices that you're using? Which is why we, of course, like to think about the improvement potential in the culture as an opportunity, not a challenge. The culture is never going to be perfect. No company culture is so innovative that it's going to stay like that forever without any effort being put into it. So if you're facing any types of issues such as you've implemented an innovation process and a tool, but people are just not responding to that, they are not sharing ideas, then it probably is a matter of not that it's never going to work for your company, but rather that the culture just isn't ready yet, and you probably haven't just fiddled around with the correct areas in order to change it for the whole program to work.
Yeah.
And now Jesse will tell us a bit about company culture in general, and after that we'll then dive into how it can be altered.
Yeah. So company culture can be a very vague and all-encompassing concept. And the way we like to think about it is that it starts from the purpose and mission of the organization. And they really set the foundation for the culture and determine the kind of people that you'll be able to attract to the company.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you have the collective values of the organization and the individual values of the people working within the organization. And then on the other hand, you have the formal processes within the organization and the informal ways of working that people have. And they are basically the concrete manifestations of those values that we talked about. And in the end, a strong company culture really needs all of these different elements to be aligned and to be in sync with one another.
Yeah.
And the point there is that each of these elements, they really should help the organization reach its ultimate goal,
Right.
whatever that may be,
Right.
in the end.
Right. Right.
If we then talk about culture, in practice, culture is really hard to change because of the nature of being such a broad concept.
Yeah.
And it's really important to realize that the change is always going to take quite a bit of time and perseverance, no matter how you look at it. And of course, the more people you have, then the longer it will always take. And there's really no way around that.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared to battle it for a while for things to really change.
Yeah, and even smaller groups of people, the culture is such a like built-in feeling for people that even like our company culture, we're only just over 10 people strong, and even changing that is a huge effort. So let's talk about thousands of people.
Generally, there are two paths to transforming company culture. So the first being top-down through the purpose and values of the organization, and then the other one being bottom-up through the actual day-to-day practices of the organization. So those formal processes and the informal ways of working that we just discussed. On paper, it's of course much easier to start with the top-down approach.
Yeah.
However, in practice, it rarely is enough in itself.
Right.
In the end, we've seen quite a few companies go wrong with that. They basically just renewed the values and thought that the culture will fix itself after that. And the end result, unfortunately, is that the only things that change are basically the words on the annual report and the posters on the walls.
Right.
And really, that's all that happens.
Yeah.
And back in the early days of our company, we actually made the same mistake ourselves.
Several times, actually.
Yeah. So when we had hired our first employees, we really wanted to define a strong culture for our company. And to do that, we then defined our values, but we didn't see through to actually making the changes to the way we work to actually like make sure that we live up to those values and work on them. So in practice, you really have to approach culture from both directions. So you have to define the purpose and the values, but you also need to make sure that the reality matches the vision.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then you're never going to get there.
That's right. That's right.
It does take a lot of hard work, but you simply have to go through all of the different, basically make sure that everything is aligned at every level of the organization and through the different practices and ways of working that you have in place. Now, the good thing with that is that even though most of us don't have the power or the authority to really change the corporate values for the entire organization, we can all change the way we work ourselves and the way our teams work. And that really goes a long way in changing the culture and really making change happen. So that's a great opportunity for all of us. So could you, Arka, then go ahead and continue on how that refers to innovation specifically?
Sure. So we basically gone ahead and divided the whole cultural transformation now related to the innovativeness of the company culture down into 6 steps. It starts off with the why, as it is generally good to do. So why be more innovative? Then the second point is to choose which practices are most suitable for our organization, which tools, which methods. The third one is actually making the decision from top down to how basically the organization is going to change, and making sure that the continuous management structure and decision making is in line with what's going to change. The fourth area here, or the fourth phase, is basically finding the part of the organization in which it's the easiest to go through with the transformation, and then using that as an example later on. And then the fifth area is to go also after concrete results quickly enough. So not going after something huge market changing at first, or at least not only going after that. And then remembering that since we're talking about cultural shift, as Jesse just went through, so it's a huge, complicated entirety that has a lot of different variables that affect each other. And you can't just change one thing and then hope that everything will fix itself.
Yeah.
So remembering to adapt and iterate as you learn, as the organization starts to accumulate skills in innovative thinking and the implementation of ideas and carrying responsibility in these areas. So the first and foremost place to start is basically the why. So this also actually outlines quite a lot the innovation strategy of the company. So why should we as a company invest time and money that could be spent in continuous activities in putting together an innovation program and being innovative? And it's not enough just to say that every company should be innovative in order to survive in the competition. That's not a good enough reason. That's sort of self-evident, but actually why? So the management and the executive level should really think about and analyze how is the world going to change? How is the market going to change? What's our role in that going to be? How should our technology develop in order to meet the demands of future customers? Are there customer segments that we currently are not addressing at all that we should?
Yeah.
And what basically needs to take place in order for all of that to happen? And it's generally not just going to be, okay, we should start cold calling new customers with the current offering. That's probably not going to work. So defining really why is this something that we are now going to be investing in?
Yeah.
The second area, which needs to be addressed in order to start transforming the culture, is to choose which practices and methods would be most suitable for our organization in specific. And this is actually the area in which most companies tend to start. So we get a lot of questions and a lot of contacts from companies saying that we've now established an innovation program and we're thinking about using the design thinking process. So do we have experience from running the whole innovation program over that? But it might be that the surrounding reason for why they should innovate and what types of things should come out of it might be still unclear.
Yeah.
So examples of frameworks and practices include more agile methods such as lean startup, design thinking, agile product development processes, even potential like entrepreneurship programs, which are quite hot at the moment.
Yeah.
And actually really good for growing these types of innovative skill sets amongst your people. And then there might be more traditional forms of generating ideas and evaluating them and putting them to work, such as some form of a phase gate or stage gate type of process. And especially for larger organizations, that's usually actually quite well functioning.
Yeah.
And actually, yes, so we're talking about before that it's also generally not enough just to choose one way of working, but rather in a larger organization, you probably need multiple different types of frameworks that are going to be applied.
Yeah, of course, if you do kind of incremental improvements to your existing product, it's going to be different than introducing the next version of your product.
Right.
And then, of course, that's completely different than introducing completely new products for new markets. So the methods that are going to work in each of those situations are bound to be different.
Yeah, that's right. So they're not going to come out of the same pipeline, basically. And in order to choose the fitting ways of working, most companies, practically all companies, have a history of innovating somehow. So utilizing that past experience from what has worked and probably also what hasn't worked. So if you know that 2 years ago an innovation program was launched and it's not here anymore today, then probably something went wrong. So figuring out what it was and learning from that. And then also benchmarking in the same industry as you're in. So connecting with your contacts, your friends that might be working in the same industry, and asking around how are they working with innovation, what has worked for them, have they used a certain partner in innovation that really worked out for them. So asking around, studying, doing the research, basically, to find the best ways to go forward in the tools section.
Yeah, and a part of it is that you're always going to have to experiment with that a little bit, because even though you do all of the research in the world, you're never going to get everything right from the get-go.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Yeah, the same has gone for us as well. So at the moment we are working with a totally hybrid model for how we as a company innovate, and we actually have our sort of customer feedback and listening to our customers as a central role in that. Then this is one of our favorite topics when it comes to the success of an innovation program and the culture as well, and also something that is unfortunately forgotten many times. So if this sounds familiar, that you've started an innovation program, you've even gotten, let's say, an innovation software in use, you've gathered people around, they're excited, you're getting a lot of ideas, but then nothing happens. So you've even evaluated that these 5 ideas are now killers for us, we should work on them. They came out of this creative activity that we set up, but then no manager of a business unit is just willing to take those in. They're just too busy with the daily work. Then usually that's the point when it's not about innovation in general as not working for you, but rather there being a problem in the decision and management structure. So in order for this to work, and in order for the culture to change as well, since idea execution is one of the core elements of innovation,
for sure,
is that the decision needs to be done from the top down and actually communicated to all levels of the organization. And the goals and the requirements for the managers need to be in line with innovation.
Exactly.
So we could, as an example, we could take a sales organization that needs to come up with a way that they can answer the modern way of selling. Let's say from a traditional method of just cold calling people, they would need to transform that around so that they are able to get inbound leads and become more efficient in their sales work. And you might even get some of the salespeople to, this is quite often difficult, but get some of the salespeople to come up with ideas. But if the goals of the sales director are just to generate more and more volume, more and more revenue for this quarter, they're not going to be spending their time, very likely at least, that they're not going to be spending their time and using their resources to innovation activities that might create potential benefits in the future. So that here is basically outlining the issue that if the decision-making structure does not support innovation and there's no room for it, then it's not going to work. So you're just going to have ideas, no execution, and a bunch of disappointed people, most likely.
Yeah, exactly.
Then this is actually a topic which many of our customers and the people who contact us, especially in the very early phase, have gotten quite right. So they know that their organization has people who are pro innovation and ones that are not. And it's always good to start off with the people who are. So it's good to identify if you have a network within the company who are pro innovation, really active, then to start off from that, or find let's say some leader who you know to be really welcoming to change, to collaborative development, and begin your work with that type of a unit or that type of a group of people, and then use the experiences and examples that you get from there to sell the same sort of topic and idea to other parts of the organization. And just so that people are realistic, so quite often we also get questions about what type of a percentage of the organization usually is going to join in and be active. And with our platform, of course, we're able to activate quite a lot of people, but it must be realized that in any online or even physical event, not everybody is going to be active and throwing around ideas and being really excited. So the numbers on this slide, but what you're seeing, those might not be exact and probably won't be exact, but they give an idea of that the large majority usually are not going to be active contributors creating ideas, progressing ideas, and making them a reality, but rather sort of watching around, seeing how is this going to play out, and then potentially once you build up the momentum, they will transform into being a contributor, so a person who is not afraid to say their opinion and is not afraid to submit an idea or to participate in an innovation workshop and voice their opinions. And this portion usually is about 1/3, just over 1/3 of a larger organization. And then just a very small percentage are the sort of ambassadors and enthusiasts and really excited people around innovation. And this is just the reality of the world, and this should be realized. So you should not, in order to measure the cultural shift also with the correct anticipations, that you're not going to be getting everybody on board from day one, but rather like a bit by bit, basically.
And it's the amount of power users is always going to be really small, and that won't change much. But the amount of contributors is the part of the audience that you can really change and try to grow. And that you can actually, like, once you get it to a sort of a critical mass, then things will start to move in and of themselves. Yeah,
definitely. And in certain cases, the finding the active people, that also might be a challenge in itself. So we've also had one customer case that worked in the car industry where the active, it was basically just an active person. So a single person in the company who didn't actually have the decision-making power over this, but saw the opportunity to become more innovative. But the issue in the end was that they did not go through all of the required steps. So, for instance, they did not alter the decision-making structure at all, which led to the fact that they did get some ideas, but nothing happened to them, and then the whole thing just died off. And for sure, this did not it will not make it easier for them to then establish innovation activities the next time around, since people have perhaps even a negative experience around the topic. Then again, we have a lot of favorite topics in the field of innovation, and it feels funny to say that over and over again, but this is also one of them. So whenever we're asked to speak about innovation, we think about what's the good place to start, the good level to start. And oftentimes it's around defining what is innovation and how is that generally divided into different subgroups. And usually it's divided into incremental innovations and then radical innovations. And the radical innovations, as we all know, are generally thought of as the Horizon 3 ideas and innovations. So things that will hopefully even create new markets or transform the market to a structure that it's not in at the moment. And we can think about that as having an unknown problem and an unknown solution. So you're just sort of trying to understand the trends and how will the world shift in the next 5 years so that you could have a certain position in that world and be successful. And that obviously, it's exciting and usually the most phenomenal things come out of that.
Yeah.
But it also has huge risk in it. And the issue is that it requires a long time span and a long investment and really long trust that this will work someday.
Yeah.
And then we have the sort of in-between area, so the in-between incremental and radical, so and which usually can take place in a matter of, let's say, 2 years. So you know what the problem is, but you don't know the solution yet. And quite typically, for instance, in the modern technology world, these might be things related to artificial intelligence or machine learning. You know that you will need more calculation power and more data and analytics to be successful in a certain business, but you don't know how you're going to be coming up with that yet, or you don't have the skills within your organization yet. And then we have the Horizon 1, which are the incremental innovations. And these are basically ideas that affect a known problem, and you also know how you're going to come up with a solution. It might be that you don't have the skills yet, but you can acquire them today and start coming up with something that will create value in the near future.
Yeah.
And why we feel that in any innovation program, in order to shift the culture and make sure that it shifts towards being innovative, is that you should, in all cases, also have these incremental innovations involved. The reasons are, for instance, that in order to build the capabilities to come up with the radical innovations, that's not going to just happen automatically, but you need a lot of iterations, a lot of work for people to get those skill sets. And that can be done through coming up with a lot of value creating innovations quickly, incremental stuff. Also, the innovativeness of the company culture, unfortunately, very often revolves around people's motivation and trust and belief towards this whole thing, creating anything useful for them. And if you're waiting a long time without any concrete results and anything that you can communicate about them, then it's quite sure, actually, that this will harm the innovativeness of the culture if people don't have a way of seeing that what's going to come out in the end out of this whole pipeline. So keeping people motivated by being able to quickly create concrete results and show how did this innovation program actually change the way that we as a company operate.
Yeah, and that works for both the employees who actually have to work on that and implement the ideas and be excited about things and create new ideas, as well as then the owners and the executives involved in that, making the decisions to really invest in that. So if they're not seeing any results in any of the innovation activities for years, then they're going to cut the investment, and that just makes sense because you don't want to keep pouring money into stuff that doesn't work at all. So you have to show that you're making progress, even though the things that you would really benefit from would still be in the future horizons.
Yeah.
So you have to make progress towards those and show that you're making progress.
Exactly, and it's actually quite likely that many of the executives wouldn't be around anymore.
Yeah, true.
For that to realize.
Yeah.
So these are the reasons why it's very important to focus also on the incremental innovations, which are in many cases thought of as being much more boring than the radical ones.
Yeah, and some might not even consider them as innovation.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, to wrap it up, how the cultural shift towards being more innovative could and should take place is that you don't try to just change everything at once and do everything at once, and also that you shouldn't take like shortcuts. So just choosing some, for instance, design thinking as a process, and then hoping that people will work with that and come up with innovations that are actually in line with your innovation strategy, if that exists, then that's just very unlikely. So taking the correct order of events and taking small steps at a time is very crucial. So starting off with the why. Why should we be more innovative, and what is our role in the future going to be as a company? Then choosing which concrete methods and frameworks and practices are suitable for our company, and how we're going to apply them in our context in specific, and not hoping that there will be some generic process that will just work out of the box, but understanding that our particular traits as a company and our culture needs to be imprinted in that in order for them to work. Then ensuring that the management systems are aligned. So making, first of all, the business decision to invest in innovation and communicating that from the top down, so that everybody understands that this is what we're doing now, and this is really important. This is just not something that one like imaginative, creative innovation manager came up with and now wants everybody to spend their time on that, which is oftentimes how it begins, and that's important. But in order for people to really get involved, the decision needs to be made from the top down, and then the daily or weekly, monthly, yearly management systems need to really support that, or nothing concrete will come out of it. Then finding the pro-innovation people, either a group of network of people within the organization, and this doesn't necessarily just need to be within your organization. It can also be across, so with partners or anything, where you can just build up the momentum and fill the points that are above this in the ladder, so the why and the strategy, basically, not just innovating anything with partners. Or then choosing an innovative manager who is welcoming to this type of activity, and starting off from their organization, and using those as then experiences to sell this internally to other people as well. Yeah,
you really need those ambassadors to really get people on board and get them excited about things, and really make actual concrete changes around the organization.
Yeah, exactly. And then, as we talked about, our last favorite topic, to go after the incremental innovation as well. So not just the market shifting, radical new Apple, Amazon, Google type of new innovations, but also actually they come up with a lot of incremental innovations as well, but they're known to shift the market. But going after the boring innovations as well, in order to keep people motivated, in order to keep the funding for the program, and to build up the skill set and the competences that you need in order to succeed in innovation in general.
Yeah, exactly. The 70-20-10 figures that you actually saw in the slide related to that actually originate from Google, and they really that's the ratio that they use to invest on each of the horizons respectively. So the majority of the investment goes into actually the money-making stuff, the search and the advertising stuff, and then the rest goes into new products, and then those moonshot projects.
Yeah. And Google is actually known to be quite good at this innovation stuff. And then the sixth point is to iterate and adjust. So understanding that the world will change throughout the time that you're going after these changes, and as the culture shifts, you're bound to be or you need to be making changes to your plan, to the practices you've chosen, to the organization in which you're running this, to the process, and all that.
Yeah.
So that basically wraps up our points for making the cultural shift. And we do realize that shifting the company culture in general is not just a matter of doing 6 little things and that's it. But these are basically the areas in which you should focus. And this is also the order in which we feel that you should be thinking about them.
Yeah.
Then before we go into the questions that you guys have asked us, we would like to take this time to promote an offer for all of the participants in this webinar. So if you do have any types of questions or concerns around innovation, your specific status at the moment, then we're offering a 1.5 hour online free consultation that either me or Jesse will be giving to you guys. And if that's something that you feel would be valuable for you, please get in touch with either of us directly through email, or then find our contact info then later on through Vemma.com. So that works as well. And Jesse, if you could tell a bit about how the material will be spread.
Yeah, sure. For all of the people who registered for this webinar, for all of those of you who are present here, as well as the ones who weren't able to make it today, we'll be sending the recording of the webinar, as well as then links to the presentation slides. So you'll get access to those. And the questions that we won't have time for today, we'll also be addressing those, and we'll let you know more about how we're going to do that via email after the webinar.
Yeah, let's do that. So, what types of questions do we have?
Could you take the chat from there? I had one here on the phases of cultural change. So on one of the slides, you had the different phases, and the person is asking, why shouldn't we start directly from the path of least resistance, in this case meaning the people who are already active in innovation?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. And that's actually also how many of the innovation programs start. So there is a group of people who want to drive innovation within the company, and then they start to think about, or even potentially have budget to start working on establishing a new innovation program. But even though that is, it sounds very logical, that often leads to the misalignment with the goals of the organization. So it's quite hard to first find a group of people and then start to think about why should we as a company be innovative, since that should include always also the basically the leadership of that unit or the whole organization.
Yeah.
So where this type of approach, or if you just find, if there's just one person who's really excited, but they are unable to get the leadership to really evaluate how should our innovation strategy be set up, which practices should we invest in and have the connections and the availability to really understand what works for our company, what doesn't, and then change the management structure, which is often the hardest part of the change management in this area, then it will most likely lead to the common issue that you do get certain people to share ideas, and you're able to even come up with business case calculations that these ideas would be useful for us, but then there is no sort of pull to really for the organization to implement them, and then it just ends up with a bunch of ideas, but no concrete results.
And I'd also like to add that if you just start from the path of least resistance and just work on what you see as the kind of maybe the low-hanging fruits or stuff like that, then oftentimes you'll end up working on the kind of nice to have things instead of the ones that are actually like strategically important for the future of your organization. So if you don't have a careful plan on what you should be focusing on, you risk working on all kinds of different just misaligned and random things.
That's it. That's actually a central point, and that's also an issue that might arise even if all of these phases have been done correctly. Is that you keep it perhaps too open for people to suggest any types of ideas, and if that gets too much attention, then you start to get a lot of ideas that are good, but the reality of the world just makes it so that you can't be implementing any idea, but they need to be aligned with what the company is actually going after during this year or during the next few years. And I had an interesting discussion about this very topic actually yesterday with one of our biggest clients.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that quite well covers that question. Did we have more?
Yeah, there's at least a couple more. What kind of an innovation culture do you yourself have at Vemma? What kind of activities are you doing to promote innovation?
Yeah, that's a good question. Would you like to share a bit about how we do things?
Yeah, so we really, for us, when we've thought about our values, and they haven't really changed much throughout the years. Like we discussed in the beginning, we just started by just doing the values part, but not really doing anything else. And ever since we've done that, we've learned to do a little bit more around that to actually make sure that we get to those values. But for example, some of our values are that we've always been really focused on quality. So we've always wanted to be really adamant on making the best software in the world for what we're doing. And that means that sometimes we won't be releasing stuff as soon as we would like to, but we always want to make sure that whatever we release is up to the par on that, and that goes for not just our software but also for all of the other things we do. For example, like working with customers and our marketing work and all kinds of areas as well. So that's been one of the core areas there, and that goes into all of the decision-making processes and the daily processes that we have in place today. We didn't really have those in the beginning, but we've made sure to implement those then. Of course, we really are big believers in also innovation coming from everywhere and anywhere. So even though we're a small company, we of course use our own software for collecting ideas. We both keep track of the ideas that come from our customers, and we make sure to kind of like have a systematic method for measuring how big of an issue are these issues and how many customers are having the same kind of issues, so that we know where the biggest things are that we should be focusing on in the future. But then we also collect ideas from our employees and staff and make sure to allocate some time and resources for implementing those.
Exactly. I wonder if I have anything else. Well, I guess the topic about incremental versus radical innovation, we really focus on the majority. I would say around 85% on the incremental innovations, and obviously as a small company as well, we need to understand how is this gonna create value for our customers in the very upcoming few months rather than creating something that would shift the whole market in a matter of years.
Yeah. We do have a bunch of projects in mind that we're working on and thinking about for the future and for the longer term, but really the majority of our resources really go into the incremental and then the slightly more longer term horizon 2 kind of initiatives.
Yeah, and I guess from our practices, we run not sort of regular, but sometimes we do run innovation workshops, so to call them. So within smaller teams or amongst the company to really boost the idea generation around a certain topic. We obviously use our own software, as Jesse mentioned, to ideate, and then we have quite good functioning agile processes for implementing the ideas. In our product development, we use a modified version of Scrum. In our marketing and sales work, there necessarily isn't a named process, but rather we implement the changes that we see value in. And what we really believe in is quick testing and iteration, and really measuring and then defining the metrics based on which we're going to be evaluating whether or not this change was worth it or not in advance. Yeah, I guess that quite well covers it.
Cool. We have some more. We have a special unit focusing on innovation. Should we still be looking to transform the whole company to be more innovative, and if so, how should we start?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And in some cases, that might be a well-functioning setup all in all. So if the majority of the workforce, for instance, are doing jobs in which it's basically a volume-based business. So it might be a grocery retailer with people who need to be putting things on shelves and cashiers and all that. It might not make sense to try to involve everybody in the innovation process, but rather have all roles represented, not just every single person, and then so that you get the information from all levels of the company and you're able to utilize that in the innovation process. But one thing that and Jesse probably knows more about this than I do, but in many studies at least, it has been shown that the more minds basically you involve in creative idea generation and in the innovation program, the better results you're going to be getting out of it. So that's basically the opportunity risk that you're taking, that if you just limit innovation to a chosen group of people, even though you would have the opportunity if changing the way that the company works to expand that to a broader group of people, then it is quite potential that you would be getting more out of it and more things that the current scope is just not able to come up with.
Yeah, definitely. I agree that if you have just these people, just this one group of people responsible for innovation, they really have to do a lot of legwork around the organization to really understand every problem that they have on the front lines of the company. So what are really the problems that the customers are facing? What are then the operational challenges that the company faces? What kind of potential opportunities would you have for improving the way you work in the future? All these kinds of challenges are really difficult to kind of like come up with from this like one group of people who might be sitting in just one area of the organization. Right. So it really puts a lot of like responsibility for the innovation group to really like know the company inside out. And it's really like I think just doesn't make sense for them to not involve people from around the organization. It doesn't mean that everybody should participate all the time, but just like make sure that like you mentioned, like all of the different parts of the organization, you're getting feedback from all of those and understanding their problems and the opportunities that they perceive in the market and with the customers.
Exactly. And then if you do have this type of a unit already available and functioning, then that's a very good premise for making the larger shift, as that's potentially the group of people that can work as ambassadors and teach people how to, for instance, how to formulate a good idea. What should you think about when coming up with an idea? How, if that group of people is able to execute ideas in an agile and quick manner, then why shouldn't the rest of the organization be able to improve at least on that? So they are able to teach people how to work differently, and can also take responsibility over the innovation processes then once those are set up, if not today. Yeah, I think that quite well covers that.
Yeah, I completely agree that like basically making sure that the group is responsible for not just like implementing the ideas, but also carrying the message, and then encouraging the other parts of the organization to start working on at least those incremental innovations and improvements, and getting the right mindset in place for actually wanting to improve and wanting to make things better, because that's really the foundation for innovation, is the hunger to improve.
Yeah, that's right. Hunger to improve and create value. Yeah, I think that covers the questions that we had now.
So far.
And we only have 4 minutes left, so probably it's good to start ramping the questions now down. So as Jesse mentioned, we'll then be in touch with you guys regarding the recording of the webinar, and please do take us up on the offer. So if you would like us to help you guys and be a sparring partner in your specific questions related to innovation or specific problems, then we're happy to hold an online workshop with you guys to move forward from there. But all in all, these were our sort of learnings and teachings from today on shifting the innovation culture of an organization. We hope that there was useful things for you, and most of all that this helped you come up with new questions and new ideas, rather than just getting answers, but thinking about have you gone through the correct phases when thinking about renewing the corporate culture in terms of innovativeness. We thank you for your time and hope this was useful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.